Hello everyone. So in this lecture we will discuss about policy push for development of the low economic regions. So India is actually a country of villages. Well, it has been like this traditionally for a very long time. In the recent times, actually, this scene has actually started to change, and we are observing actually change in the rural areas also. The reach of the development, the reach of the economic actually growth of India is reaching in the rural areas also, in the remote areas also, and people are actually able to get some services, get some like goods, reaching to their doorsteps in these remote locations also, which is actually a long due actually requirement which has been traditionally actually lacking for a very long time, and Indian economy was not able to meet not able to actually deliver the benefits of like it's a economic like a system to the people from like these areas. So we can see there is a actually strong push from the government to develop the rural areas also, to develop the actually remote areas also. So the first actually initiative has been like taken in the form of the network of road networks. So there are actually construction of the roads is going on in the remotest of the remote places, and India is actually trying to connect its all the corners of the all of the states. So it's actually welcome activity with the road network. The benefits of the economic actually systems in terms of like a consumer goods, in terms of like a services, in terms of like a education, health facilities, all of these will be able to actually reach to serve its like a citizens. So we can see over here, even in that like a scenario like how India has actually registered actually positive actually rate of like a growth in the like recent times. So at the world level, if we see, we discussed this about in the like a previous lecture, but this is the actually figure given over here, like how India is in one of those countries who are actually registering more than like a plus 5% of growth annually for like a quite of a few number of like years in the recent times. So you can see like the countries who are registering like less than actually 0.5% of actually growth, or rather they are into currently in the negative actually space. They are actually not growing, they are rather shrinking, they are actually decreasing in terms of like a GDP capacity over the like years. So those are indicated here in the like this maroon color you can see. And then in the last one, if you see the countries who are registering actually plus 5% of growth, well, India has consistently registered a growth above like a 6 to 7%, up to like a 9% in the recent years. So India is actually in that league. So we can see over here. In the next slide, we are talking about like a UN like a environment focuses on the like a policy like a mainstreaming. So how actually these policies, how these actually guidelines which are coming from the like a top are actually benefiting, are going to benefit to our like low economic regions, to our like rural actually areas. So if you see like there are like policy developments, there are actually technical assessments and knowledge products are also being developed, and there are like a policy toolkits and guidelines being actually framed from agencies such as like United Nations, and from there it is percolating to several other like a monetary agencies such as like a World Bank and IMF, etc. And in turn actually Indian government, in turn of the like a state governments are also actually framing their policies to suit actually such needs, to cater to the actually society, to cater to the actually community of the country, and they are framing their policies in that actually sync. So we can see what are the instruments they are using for like a financial mechanisms are actually being erected actually these days. So traditionally India had like a government supported like a public sector banks only. In the last like a few decades, the private sector was also open for like a banking services, and now we have a huge actually number of like a companies who are operating this banking and financing business in India, and they are also have become a major actually part as a lender and as an like investment investor in the like a growth of the country right now. The third one talks about like capacity building. So how this whole growth, how this whole like the process can be actually taken up is by going ahead for the like a capacity building. So India has a like a largest number of like a youth, largest number of like a human resource. So how this human resource can be trained and put to the good use for the like a growth and development of this country, as well as how this opportunity can become like an employability for them, and they can actually engage into like a the by the for the like a building of this nation. So by conducting like a trainings, by conducting actually institutional strengthening. So in the recent actually decade, India has several opened like a several like a higher education technical education actually institutions. India has opened several like a top notch like a medical institutions also across the country, and several other types of like institutions are also like opened for like a training and activities actually. So there are several schemes started by India like a Skill India, Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, etc., who actually focus mainly to train the youth from the like rural areas, from the like towns, and make them enable them to employ themselves and to become like a independent, to become like an entrepreneurs, to start their own venture, and be part of this whole economic actually activity. So we can see on the approaches part from the first one, like a policy development support for the mainstreaming of green economy in all relevant policy areas and strategies at regional and national level. And on the technical assessment and knowledge products, development of appropriate tools including strategic environmental assessments, environmental and climatic evaluations, social impact assessments, environmental and social and green procurement standards are also being framed. On the policy toolkits and guidelines, policy support for the development of green economy and low carbon development strategies, and for their implementation at national and regional level. So we can see like the focus is on to actually reduce the carbon actually emission, to reduce actually overall like a ecological impact going to actually take place with this mammoth scale of like a growth and development actually push, which is happening around now, right now. So this is one of the actually welcome aspects, one of the actually positive aspects, to see at least the intent is there to handle, to drive this growth and development in a responsible way. On the economic instruments parts, if you see, financial mechanisms and new business models support the development and promotion of green financial sector regulation and assistance for policymakers to foster the incorporation of financial sector in transformation process towards the green economies. So you see that there is always this attention for the creating like a green financial sector also, and which will lead us to for the like a greener economies. On the third front of the capacity building for like a training and institutional strengthening, development of capacity building initiatives and activities to address immediate green economy knowledge gaps, needs, and like a policy priorities, integration of long-term institutional knowledge and skill through policy dialogues, training and the application of toolkits with the aim of strengthening organizational commitment and capacities to drive green economy policy development, implementation, and compliance. So the initiatives which I just spoke of like a couple of minutes back, so those are the actually resultants, those are the actually action points of these like a policy documents and directives, which are coming from like a responsible and very like a sensitive organizations such as like a United Nations, and they are being implemented in such a very like in an efficient administrative manner in the India, which is going to actually help India to grow like a sustainably. Well, what are the challenges and policy implications for like a development of like a rural entrepreneurship? So let's have a look. So the challenges faced by these rural entrepreneurs are like a growth of the like a mall culture has become actually one of the challenges for the like a rural areas, and poor assistance, power failure. Well, these are the some of the still like improvement areas we can see like India is working, and I'm sure in the recent times it's. So there are, as we can see, these are the some of the areas where there is still like a scope of like a opportunity in the power sector, in strengthening actually the technical know-hows of the like our youth, and then capacity utilization. So these are the actually areas which we just saw in the previous slide, like how government is increasing actually its intervention, increasing its like a capacity building in these areas. So these are the some of the actually challenges which we can see prevailing over a large part of our country. Uh, so in the like a general welfare terms, if we see like there is like a economic welfare, and there is like a social, cultural, and political welfare. So how this rural area is actually getting actually some kind of like an intervention. So there are some initiatives taken by like a government to support the rural sector. If you see, like there are like a price support, minimum support price mechanism. There is like a crop insurance facilities there. Research extension is happening in the rural areas. So researches and findings, scientific actually gatherings from the like agriculture sector and other like sector is being delivered to the rural sectors also. There are several other types of reforms are being actually pushed for land reforms, drought and flood relief, debt relief, subsidies, rural electrification, rural health services, cooperatives, etc. So these are the some of the initiatives which governments have actually taken in the recent times for optimal distribution of income, for actually optimal distribution of opportunities in these areas also, for the optimal actually allocation of resources, so that a cohesive actually growth and development can take place in both of the rural as well as urban areas. So these are the some of the policy actually action points which we can see over here. Why this is important to actually discuss this in this lecture? It is very important for us to visualize actually the kind of products and services and actually systemic interventions which are going to take place across India, and we must be aware of actually what is going on and in what format, and accordingly only we can actually work around. So knowing about these policies, rules, regulation, and the intent of the government, intent of the several NGOs and research agencies, it is very important for us to actually understand them. So on a snapshot, if you see how the some of the important sectors such as agriculture and others are performing in the rural actually sector of the India. So if you see over here, there in the agriculture households, non-agricultural households, total are households from estimated person in crores. Okay, estimated HH, it's estimated actually average monthly HH, average monthly HH consumption expenditure, average monthly HH surplus, proportion of HH reporting on saving in the last 1 year. So these are actually some data I thought of actually giving you over here. This is the actually research by NABARD. So NABARD is an actually a rural financing actually organization which works for actually promotion, particularly in the rural areas. And NABARD is actually playing very important role in upliftment of the rural India for several decades now. So we whenever we have to actually intervene in actually these areas, we can take help of actually such agencies. We can go to these agencies and we can actually look for actually a cohesive environment where we can input, we can provide our inputs. So on the policy conundrum side, if you see rural distress is evident in falling farm income. Well, there have been some actually inconsistencies observed in the some recent times, and food disinflation, but services inflation has remained high even in rural India, making it complicated for a policymaker. So there are some challenges which has being observed from the rural sector. So how this whole thing can be addressed is the actually talk of the discussion at this time. So where and how we can intervene in the at the systemic level is the actually major actually point of discussion over here. So you can see how the services inflation is observed in the urban and rural sector over here, and how the core inflation is observed in the urban and rural sector over here. So it's given by these actually graphs. So as we can see, this in an overall sense, this rural sector actually has registered 3.6.38, and this urban sector has registered 5.84% services inflation, and in the core inflation actually urban sector has registered more compared to the rural sector. So these are actually some of the observations from agencies who conduct actually such researches in both of the places of rural and urban India, which will help us actually understand the scenario how, and we will be in a better position to how to deal with them. Thank you everyone.